What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Elevation with Chris Orm. It's a big milestone today because it's episode 20. And in the studio today, we have Tim Albright, president of AVNation, who's joining us live. He's in town for the NAB conference, and he has so much to share with us, and I'm really, really excited to have him on the show. We have a 25-year veteran in the AV industry, and Tim really has a whole lot to tell us.
It just means I'm old, Chris. That just means that's what that means.
Old, right? Wise, whatever you want to call it.
You know, it depends on the day and depends on, who's talking. Like, if it's about kids, it just means old.
Yeah. Well, it's a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for making some time while you're in town.
Absolutely.
It's an absolute honor.
Yeah.
So Tim and I met late last year in 2024 at the CEDIA event, so September 2024. So Tim, if it's okay with you, I wanted to dedicate this show to Arlen, the moderator and the editor-in-chief at CE Pro.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this show is dedicated to you, Arlen, for really bringing Tim and I together. It was a great honor to share the CEDIA Smart Stage with you. It was great to share what we saw at the event and kind of what our predictions for the smart home are.
Yeah.
With that, I want to allow you to introduce your company, AVNation, which you started in 2011.
Yep.
So tell us more about AVNation, what you guys do, and who you are.
So the quick and easy version of what AVNation is we're a news company, right? We're a media company. We cover the audiovisual space primarily in the commercial side. We do have a residential side as well, but the biggest part of what we do and the biggest percentages of the articles that we produce are covering the commercial side. So think, permanent installs, conference rooms, stadiums, things of that nature. And we do that for a couple different ways. We make podcasts like this, right? You've been on our residential podcast with my buddy Matt Scott. We also do a weekly version of on the commercial side of Matt's weekly Resi Week. We call it AV Week.
Yep.
That's the one that I host. We have a couple of monthlies that dig even deeper into the AV industry. One that looks at higher education, one that looks at women in AV, one that looks at control and automation. And the whole idea here is to educate and inform the decision makers, right?
Sure.
The people that are living this and working this on a daily basis, folks that are responsible for the upkeep of their conference room, for the upkeep of the stadium graphics and the stadium LED walls, and just quite frankly to help them make better informed decisions.
Sure. So as a broadcast journalist, how do you deal with covering brands specifically? Right?
Very carefully.
Yes, because I know in journalism there's very specific rules. You can't accept things for for compensation. So there's certain rules that you have to walk around. Could you just briefly explain to those for anyone outside of the journalism industry, like what barriers and what things do you have to work through when reviewing product or recommending product?
Well, first of all, you have to be fair.
Sure.
And very early in AVNation's life, and I started in probably my first real full-time broadcast journalist job. I worked for a radio station in St. Louis. It was a CBS station, a CBS affiliate called KMOX. And I learned from them that you are not going to be the prototypical 60 minutes reporter barging into a company's headquarters and shoving a mic in their face and saying why did you do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
You treat people with respect. You treat them fairly.
Yeah.
However, if they do something boneheaded, you have to point that out.
Yeah.
And during COVID and during some of the supply chain challenges, that was probably the most fraught part of my career because you have these folks that you've built relationships with, contacts and people that you personally know in these organizations. However, their organization's doing some pretty boneheaded things. Yeah. So you kind of have to, again, our promise to our listeners, our promise to our audience is to give them the education and the information that they need to make qualified decisions.
Sure.
So part of that is saying, hey, company ABC over here, they're not getting the job done.
Yeah.
So you might want to look at alternatives for the time being. And so you treat them fairly, but you also have to call out some of the issues that are being brought up by them.
Sure.
To answer your point directly, you just don't take stuff. And if you have some sort of barter agreement, then you call that out.
Right.
Right. AVNation is a business. We have sponsors.
Yeah.
And if we do a story on a sponsor, you will hear me say, Crestron is one of our sponsors. If we do a story on Crestron, I will say something to the effect of, a reminder, Crestron is a sponsor of AVNation, right? And then you go on with the story.
Yeah.
That way, the audience then can make their own determination on whether or not I'm being fair, whether or not I'm being overly generous, or if I'm being overly harsh, right? But at least, the audience has the information to make the decision.
Sure. So I have two questions based on that. And I think the first one's a little bit funny. So when you record content, there's someone on the other side watching. When did you first realize that AVNation has someone on the other side watching?
I don't know that anybody's watching.
No, come on, Tim. We know people are on the other side.
So I will take you back to radio for a second. Okay. And when you are recording, and when I was on the radio, it was I spent most of my radio career on morning radio. Okay, so understand that in morning radio, you're getting it in the studio between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. You're going on the air between 5 and 6, right? And I was on a couple different shows, and one started at 5, one started at 6.
Sure.
And even in today's radio, you don't get a whole lot of immediate feedback or even feedback a lot. There's an old stat that said no more than 10% of your audience will ever reach out to you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, okay, so in that moment, you are simply talking to colleagues, you're talking to friends, or you're talking to, if you have somebody on the line, again, in radio, you have them on the phone or on satellite, but you're just having a conversation. I think about the audience, and I think even back then, you think about the audience when you're preparing the show.
Right.
When you're selecting the stories for AV Week. It is, again, it's the topics and the stories that they care about, that they should care about, or they need to know about. When I'm recording, I don't.
Right.
And I think that was a trick I learned back in the early days, because if you sit there and think about your audience, you could get frozen very easily.
Sure.
Right? The very first radio job I had, we were the #1 show in St. Louis, and that meant roughly 500, 600,000 people listening at one time.
Nice.
That's nice, yes, from an audience standpoint, but that'll freak you out, right?
If you think about 500,000 people in a stadium.
Yeah. I mean, that'll lock you up pretty easily. Yeah. So in the moment, you don't.
Right.
It is in the prep, and then for AV Week now, it is also in the post. Some of the things that we do, whether that's social media clips and stuff like that. But at the moment, you don't. You just have a conversation like this.
And in terms, you mentioned social media, so I wanted to bring it up. How has social media evolved the world of journalism, broadcast journalism?
My gosh.
Right, so you're talking about radio. So then we start evolving. Like, what comes after radio in terms of broadcast? Podcasting?
Yeah.
And then where does social media come in that? It goes... Podcasting is before social media, or are they kind of at the same time?
You could almost call podcasting a version of social media if you wanted.
How do you use tools like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook?
So it depends on the platform, right? Because and I'm going to get geeky marketing on you for a second.
Let's do it.
So as a podcaster, as a content creator, your job is to get your message and your content out to as many people as possible, right? Social media is a fantastic conduit for that.
Promotion.
Different platforms allow you different things. And I'm not even going to get into the algorithm because I'm not smart enough to know that, right? However, there are certain platforms that allow you to do certain things. You mentioned Instagram. Instagram, in those posts, don't allow you to do links.
Yeah.
Well, how in the world am I going to give you... I can do a clip, right? And then cross my fingers and hope you realize who the freak you're listening to or where that clip came from. So Instagram for us is more to promote stories of other people's things that have really great graphics, right? Yeah. And then you put the link in your bio, right? Stuff like that. LinkedIn and X and Facebook are they do allow you to do, direct links back to your own content. And so each platform allows you different things, but the other part of it is it allows you to build community. And podcasting specifically, I mentioned that radio, the next iteration of radio is podcasting. Very long time ago, I taught radio broadcasting production at the college I graduated from.
Nice.
And mid 2000s, late 2000s, part of my curriculum, we started teaching our students how to produce podcasts.
Okay.
Because in essence, podcasting is, especially at that time, was nothing more than a radio program that was condensed, that had very little limits, if any limits at all. Understand I came from traditional terrestrial radio broadcasting where we had the FCC.
Right.
The FCC, Howard Stern, the FCC is a long story, but you couldn't say certain things. Right. George Carlin and the 7 dirty words and all that jazz. Podcasting, you didn't have that limitation, right? So our students could be as creative as they wanted, which was fantastic, right? And you take an 18, 19, 20-year-old and say, there's no limits here. You can talk about anything you want. You can say, and they did say anything they wanted. But that's why I think podcasting is the next evolution of radio, because especially if it's an audio-only podcast, and there's different psychological studies about the intimacy of audio-only and all that. Video certainly has become another part of it, and that's a very valid part, right? Whether that's YouTube or Instagram Shorts or whatever, Reels. So you have these various platforms that allow you to do certain things, including build a community. And that community is what will sustain you, and quite frankly, was what will grow you.
Gotcha. So you use social media, 1 for promotion and 2 for community?
Yes.
Is that safe to say?
Yes.
And social media is a necessary part of your promotion strategy.
It is the only part of our promotion strategy.
Nice.
I mean, really. So AVNation and many media outlets like it is a digital only, not even digital first, but digital only. So how do you get people to your website? Right? How do you get people? You get it through social media, and you invite them to connect with you, and if you give them enough value, then they'll give you your email, their email address, and that's another way. But the on-ramp is either social media, or if you've made a deep enough connection with your audience, a recommendation, right? If you and I are hanging out and you're like, Tim, what podcast do you listen to? Or I might be really enamored by a podcast. I would say, Chris, you should listen to this. Yes, right. But those are very far in between. So you really gotta lean in on the social.
That's really interesting. I mean, I haven't thought about it from that perspective, but what you're saying makes a whole lot of sense. So I definitely see that. As far as your strategy behind it, who on your team is working the social? Who's deciding what content is being pushed where and how frequently?
It is a collaborative effort.
Okay.
So there's 4 main ones on our team, and I look at it from a kind of the 50,000 foot view, right? And I'll give you a really good example, and that is, I mentioned the social clips. And I started seeing, especially on LinkedIn and on Instagram, a lot of uses for, let's say, 20 to 30-second clips, right? And they were formatted in this very specific way, from a not 16 by 9, but a 9 by 16 format. And I started seeing a lot of reports, both in podcasting media as well as regular media, saying that this is getting traction, right? People are engaging in it, engaging with it. And the other part of it, though, was there was CG, there was words along with those clips, because not everybody's listening. So you got to give them the content in written form.
The captions were such a game changer.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So as the boss, I'm looking at this going, okay, guys, this sounds fantastic to me. Understanding that I'm adding a workload to my production team. So we have a conversation, right? What does that look like? How do we do that? There's this tool and that tool and this tool. So we start playing around with it. I start playing around with it. You know, I do not edit much anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm still fairly, competent
Sure.
editor, right? I still have the Adobe suite on my computer. It doesn't get open very often, but I do have it.
He has it.
So I open it up, right? And I start playing around with it. I start playing around with this tool and that tool until I get to a point where I'm like, okay, this is roughly what I want.
Yeah.
Right? This is roughly what I want to see. And then I pass it off to both our social media strategists and our production team. I'm like, okay, this is roughly what I want. What does this look like to you guys? Like, what does this mean to you? What does this mean to your workload, to your workflow?
Yeah.
And we have a conversation, right? Understand, the conversation is not them talking me out of it, because I'm pretty well set at that point, right? I understand enough to go, okay, I understand what it takes to make this now.
Yeah.
And I also understand over here the studies and everybody saying this is really engaging and we're getting a lot of traction out of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So those two things, I'm sold.
Yeah.
We're going to try it. We're going to try it for a set amount of time.
Sure.
So then they come back and go, okay, well, this is what that looks like to our workload, right?
Yeah.
You're going to add an hour to my week. You're going to add 2 hours to my week. Okay. Well, then what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Where's some efficiencies we can find? Where's some things we can offload? Because it's valuable enough to me as the boss for you to do this.
Right.
Right? I don't have it in my workload to do.
Yeah.
Technically, it's your job to produce to edit. So where can we offload so we're not overtaxing you?
Right.
Right? Understanding I'm adding something to your plate.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
I understand that. I accept that.
Yeah.
What can I take off? Right? So it's a collaboration and it's communication.
So, one, I want to highlight and compliment you. The fact that as a boss, as a leader, that you can recognize that and come to a podcast and state that, that clearly states that you are very, you have emotional intelligence. So I want to first compliment you on that.
There you go.
That's awesome. And it seems that you know the power of social media. You know what it's going to take to get these clips out there to promote the show, to promote the brand. And I mean, it seems like social media is working out well for you.
It has. I used to tell this story, especially in the early days of AVNation. I came up with the idea of AVNation I way back when Google had something called Google Hangouts, and actually it was Google Plus, which if you were old enough to remember Google Plus, and a bunch of us that were in the industry were just kind of messing around with it, right? And they had, I want to say it was called an instant hangout or something. Basically, it was a button you could press and you could instantly be on a video call with a couple people. Two people who have since become dear friends. One is a guy by the name of Rich Fregosa out of San Francisco. Another is Bradford Ben, who at the time worked for Harman. Now he's a consultant down in Orlando. And the three of us just chatted.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I still had, I was out of radio at that point. I was working for a small community college as a tech manager. And I had wanted something. I had wanted a podcast of some sort like in AV. At the time I was listening to This Week in Tech, which is a pretty, I mean, it's been around for over 20 years.
Can I pause you there?
Yeah.
I love Leo Laporte.
Yeah, I do too.
Right? Like
he's the godfather.
I think that's is he part of the reason you're here today?
Absolutely.
He's part of the reason I'm here today. Do you know who Chris Perillo is?
I do.
Literally, those two guys in my childhood made me who I am today.
Do you want me to blow your mind?
Please do it. You're friends with Chris Perillo? What?
Do you know who Patrick Norton is?
Yeah, from with Veronica Belmont and what's their podcast? The not Dignation. Techzilla. Yes, on Rev 3. Yes. Tell me what's up with Patrick Norton.
I am friends with Patrick Norton.
Nice.
I work with Patrick Norton.
Nice.
Patrick Norton moved to St. Louis during the pandemic, and he and I. This is another story about the power of social media. I had followed him because of Revision 3 and his time on Leo's show, and he made some it was on X, and he made some comment about St. Louis, and I mean, there are moments in my life where I really I don't think it through, because if you think it through too much, you just don't do it.
Yep. And
I have talked with enough people that every once in a while I'll blow my kids' minds. Like, you've met that person? Yes, I have. It's fine. It was 100 years ago. So I was like, "Are you in St. Louis?" Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be weird. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
be that guy, but
Yeah.
are you in St. Louis? And he goes, yeah. Da, 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 da. I said, again, not to be weird, I would love to just buy you lunch.
Yeah.
Right? I appreciate you. I respect you, this, that, and the other. A very, very long story, very, very short. A year later, Patrick ended up coming to work for us
Yeah.
at CTI as a content creator, as a writer.
Yeah.
And it has been one of the best just education and inspiring relationships that I've gotten I've been blessed to have.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Like those individuals, Patrick Norton included, are the reason why I became who I was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe we'll clip this. Maybe we can get it out to Patrick Norton, but that would be awesome.
I can call him right now if you want.
No,
I mean,
that would be so crazy.
I talked with him this afternoon. I'm
Yeah.
not kidding. It's a very long story.
Yeah.
But, so I'm here at NAB and I'm doing a job, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing my
Yeah.
job. But we're at the National Association of Broadcasters, and so there are products that I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
Paul, I can do this. I need that.
Yeah.
I need this
Yeah.
for my job.
Yeah.
And so after like 2 or 3 demos, I sent him a text. I'm like, hey, dude, you got 5 minutes. I need to talk this through. And so we're in the midst of kind of retooling AV Week.
Yeah.
And this piece of software specifically would help us do that. And so we chatted for 5 minutes, and he's like, okay, do this and this and this. I'm like, okay, cool. So, but yeah, we could text him.
He's blew my mind.
I mean, it's 7
We'll send him
PM.
a video. I'll just send him a video after this, letting him know how much he inspired me as a young man.
No.
Okay. Well, wow.
Anyhow.
So,
Leo Laporte, This Week in Tech, Google Hangouts, right?
yes.
And in the midst of this conversation, this random conversation with 2 yahoos I didn't know at the time, right? My brain starts kind of clicking and going, I could just record this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I am not an engineer, but I knew enough to go, I could take the output of this computer and I could plug it into this and I could press record and I could have a podcast.
Yeah.
And so about a month later, literally, Chris, I sent a I sent a tweet out it was still called Twitter then. I sent a tweet out, and the AV community has a hashtag called AV Tweeps.
Yep.
So I put a tweet out onto AV Tweeps, and I said, I'm looking to do a podcast. Does anybody want to join me?
Yeah.
And I had 2 individuals, George Tucker, who again has become a really good friend. He's out of Yonkers, New York. A woman by the name of Linda Sedfrimbus, and then I forced a buddy, one of my oldest friends, who was a rep for Sennheiser at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I forced him to be on with me. He just didn't have a choice. And went into the radio station at the college that I worked at. We had a college radio station, and hooked up a computer. We used Skype instead of Google Hangouts.
Yep.
And pressed record.
Nice.
And that was the end of July in 2011, and we have done 700 and some odd episodes since then.
It's amazing.
I don't even know. Yeah, 700 something.
It's amazing. And this started because you were passionate about having these conversations.
I was passionate about 2 things. I was passionate about having. I had fallen into the industry, and I was passionate about it. And I was still passionate about radio. Still am passionate about radio. You can't make a living at it, but I was still passionate about radio. And I still think I'm still passionate about bringing other people together and giving them a voice. That's one of the things that I think the media does fairly well. I think they've lost a couple of steps, and I'm talking about media in general overall here. Yeah. We can have a conversation later about both bias in media as well as bias in the sources that they use. They have migrated mostly towards government officials is a broader sense, but basically Congress people on both sides of the aisle and this, that, and the other. But I think at a time, the media gives people a platform and a voice and allows them to not just speak their mind, but allows them to put a spotlight on issues and problems and solutions that the average ordinary American or person really hasn't maybe thought of.
It gives them opportunity to see what's out in the world that they may not be exposed to.
Yeah.
So when you started this in 2011, you started on Skype with some AV tweeps. After your first episode, what happened next?
I just kept checking how many downloads and listens that we had, and I was blown.
Where were you publishing?
Good Lord, where were we about what was publishing? I don't even remember now. Good Lord.
2011, it's been some time.
It has been a minute, and I've slept since then. I think pretty early on we were leveraging Amazon AWS.
Nice.
And we probably did it badly the first probably year. Pretty quickly we rolled up a website, a pretty bad one, so I had been teaching podcasting, so I knew enough about RSS and RSS coding.
Yeah.
So I hard coded
Yeah.
the RSS feed for probably the first 6 months.
Yeah.
And there's a couple pieces of software that's still out there now, and started leveraging those and streamlining the workflow. But yeah, we used AWS for a very long time.
Yeah.
And now we use a system called Art19, oddly enough, which is owned by Amazon.
Yeah.
But that system gives us a few things, including some reporting that we didn't have through AWS. We probably, but yeah, just started straight up, just putting it on an AWS server.
That's awesome. It's really fascinating to hear about this because it's not every day that I get to hear about the insights of really audio, video, or technically the audio video media industry. So I have the expert here on my show. So
you have a Yahoo from St. Louis.
No, Tim, we don't have to be too humble, but I want to know, I went to college, I studied business, I went back to school, I got my MBA. So I'm interested in the business model of journalism.
Oh.
So talk to us. So you mentioned sponsors earlier.
Yep.
What other revenue sources? So advertising revenue, is advertising revenue and sponsorships, is that one and the same?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are other sources of revenue?
In the media landscape, most publishers would tell you that is pretty much it.
Okay.
Now, there are different types.
Sure.
Right? I'm sure that you heard the term advertorial, right? Mm-hmm. So it is a sponsored article that is put into, a website or the newspaper where a sponsor or an advertiser has paid for the placement of that piece of content, right? And that advertorial can take a couple different forms. It can be a written form. It can also be an audio and video form, right? And so that's one way. Another way is, I'm not doing it this show, but in the past, we have done where we will do longer versions of a booth tour at a trade show, right? Where if I spend an hour at this and we produce, an enhanced version of a booth tour, then that could be, a sponsored content. And again, it goes back to the relationship with the audience. You make sure that that's highlighted. Right? This is a sponsor. This is sponsored content. The other way is digital ads, which is certainly going away. I shouldn't say going away. The popularity is going away, and the reason the popularity is going away is because their effectiveness is going away. Yeah. Right. We as a society have learned to ignore them. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's almost like it's almost like we're nose blind to digital ads. Now there are some that are certainly engaging, and they do elicit clicks, and they do elicit some sort of interaction. I mean, that is how Google makes their billions. That's how Facebook makes their money. Yeah. So somebody's working. They're working somewhere for somebody. But in the media landscape overall, they really are kind of a second or third tier today.
Interesting. And then, I want to cover, you mentioned tours of booths at expos. I have always struggled to make expo content exciting.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, do you go to many different events throughout the year and cover the show?
Yep.
How do you make it more engaging? Because you could have an interview with someone, and are you cutting that interview?
Typically, no.
Typically, no.
No. So I'll answer your question directly. The number one question and the first rule is, do you have anything new? Right. The first or second show that I go to, so actually Patrick and I will go to CES every other year, right? And the reason that we've kind of landed on every other year is because CES is really massive.
Yeah.
It's really expensive.
Yeah.
And not every year is going to be something
Yeah.
worthwhile.
Yeah.
Right. So without fail, the first AV-centric show that I do is ISE, Integrated Systems Europe.
Yeah.
Happens in Barcelona, typically the first or second week of February. First of all, Barcelona is not a bad place to go.
Sure.
Let's start there.
Yeah.
Second, ISE has become the preeminent show in the world and on the calendar. And it's happened that way for a couple of different reasons. First of all, the people that run it are freaking fantastic. And it happens right after CES. There's still a buying cycle going on.
Yeah.
And manufacturers have shifted their product announcements to that show.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, right? So all those things, put together, ISE is definitely something we have to go to.
Yeah.
And typically we don't have to ask if there's anything new.
Yeah.
Because
There is.
90% of the time there is, right? And then I will go to a show called Enterprise Connect, which is typically a UC kind of show.
UC, what does that mean?
Unified Communications.
Unified Communications.
So conferences.
Gotcha.
Conference rooms
Yep.
and platforms. Zoom is a big player in that space.
Yeah.
Microsoft is, Teams is a big player in that space. But that also had Shure and Sennheiser and Biamp, right?
Yeah.
So then, okay, well, that's the end of March. ISE is in the 1st of February. Okay, definitely got to ask that question, right? What's new?
Yeah.
And do you have anything new?
Yeah.
Like, and if the answer is no, then you go, okay, well, why are we talking? Now, this happens off camera. Like, then why are we doing this, right?
Yeah.
And having that conversation will allow you to discover something, right? Sometimes you don't do the video, right? Sometimes you just, go, okay, nice to see you, Chris. Great. See you at the next one. NAB is a similar one where, okay, well, I just saw a bunch of your folks at ISE.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Right.
And NAB is an interesting animal because of the market. And the market is this: yes, it's called National Association of Broadcasters. So, CBS, NBC, ESPN, right? Yeah, absolutely. Except there's a lot of corporate customers that are putting in broadcast stuff.
Yeah.
Every stadium you go into, right? I still need to go to Allegiant because it's gorgeous, and
They do tours every day.
I will make it eventually. Apparently, I'm spending like half my year in Vegas next year.
Oh.
That's a different conversation. But Allegiant has broadcast quality gear
Sure.
to do what they do,
Of course.
right?
Of course.
The Rockets have broadcast quality gear. The company that I work for, CTI, though, our owners, they did a system at Michigan State. Broadcast gear to run the football stadium for Michigan State.
Yeah.
So it's not NBC, but it's still broadcast, right? Shure is at NAB. Sennheiser is in NAB, right? Sony. So these companies that we run into at these AV-centric shows are here, and so then you have that conversation, right? Not only what's new, why are you here? Right? Now Sony kind of makes sense. Sony makes cameras, and they got all. But Sennheiser, like, I understand you make microphones, dude, but okay. So we have that conversation. InfoComm comes up, right? InfoComm is in June.
Could I pause you there? I've never been to InfoComm. I have a pass for this year. I'm on the fence about going.
So my 2 cents.
Sure.
You spend most of your time in residential.
Yes.
Okay. If you want to go to Orlando in June,
Is it in Orlando?
It's in Orlando this year.
I thought it was in Orange County. What did I think is in Orange County?
It's at the Orange County Convention Center,
In Orlando?
which is in Orlando.
Oh my God! Well,
I keep blowing your mind.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I was going to go, but I don't think I'm going to go now.
But it'll be back in Vegas next year.
Okay,
right?
wonderful.
So for you, that would make.
I'm going to wait then.
Yeah,
Yes.
wait.
Thank you.
But you've got, it happens in June. Education is they're getting ready to gear up for their installs for the summer. The corporate space, corporate's always doing something, so that's not really a thing. Government, they are in the midst of, and the end of their cycle, if I remember right, or the beginning of their cycle, is like September. So it's kind of a nice halfway point. It's also a nice halfway point between ISC and CEDIA.
Yep.
So another one, right? So you still have that conversation. What's new?
Yeah.
What have we done since ISC?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of announcements that still happen at that show. CEDIA kind of rounds out the year, and again, different market, but you've got a lot of crossover, right? Sony is at that show. Crestron is at that show.
Yeah.
Legrand, who is another huge player, is at that show. And so you kind of end your year with CEDIA, and you start gearing up for ISC come November, December.
And it's a cycle.
It's a cycle.
And then if I could ask you, let's say you're not interested by the things that brand A is telling you about. It doesn't spark an interest to you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with the content that you've recorded? Are you going to publish it anyways? Do you have a duty and an obligation after you film something? Do you have to publish it?
Well, I don't have to. So here's the way I'll answer that. Number one, 99% of the time I will publish it, and here's why. Just because something doesn't excite me doesn't mean it's not newsworthy.
Right.
I am not the arbiter of what is news and what isn't, right? I am a little bit, right? Certainly I'm the editor-in-chief, and I decide, especially for AV Week, what stories we cover.
Yep.
But if you're going to sit here and tell me that this newfangled thing is the best thing since sliced bread, number one, I ain't smart enough to tell you whether or not it is or not, right? Because I am not an engineer.
Yeah.
And I'm going to lean on a lot of the smart people that I know.
Yeah.
And this is not me being self-deprecating or falsely humble. One of my lines that I will tell people is I am not smart. I just know smart people. And what I mean by that is I can't design a system. Now, I could probably cobble together something that would work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're in a freaking fantastic podcast studio, right? With lights and audio and video, right? If you gave me enough caffeine, right, and enough graph paper, I could come up with something that would work. Would it be ideal? Would it be efficient? Probably not, but it'd work.
Someone could definitely do it better.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Right? And I know some of those people, right?
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll go, okay, right? One of the guys that I pick their brain a lot, his name is Eric. One of the nicest guys in the world, one of the smartest guys I know. I'll go, Eric, help me understand this, right? Or I think this is cool. Mm-hmm. Tell me I'm wrong or right and why. Or help me wrap my head around this. Especially in the last 4 to 5 years, there's been a lot of software-based solutions and a lot of cloud-based solutions.
Yeah.
And again, and this is not me being falsely humble. I just don't know enough. And I'm trying to kind of get the use case. In addition, I have really, really dear friends who are IT managers, who are AV managers that do this on a daily basis. And I'll pick their brains. I'm like, does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
Like, would you use this, right? And if the answer is yes, then okay.
Yeah.
Then I am off base, right? That my malaise to this announcement is unfounded.
Yes.
Or if they're like, I have no idea why in the world I would ever use this, right? Well, then I'm like, okay.
You'll trust their opinion, maybe get a second opinion.
Absolutely.
And, let's say someone is speaking with you at a show and they're just trying to sell. It's no longer like about the dialogue. It's about like shilling product. Mm-hmm. Does that happen?
Oh, absolutely.
And it'll still get published?
No.
No.
Because here's what will happen though, is 90% of the time, if they understand, if they understand the relationship, they understand AVNation, they understand me.
Yeah.
They're not going to give me a shill.
Yeah.
Right? They're not going to give me a salesperson.
Yeah.
It does happen though.
Yes.
The way you get through that is by asking hard questions.
Yeah.
Right? So in this play acting, you're the shill,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to tell me all the fantastic things that this product's going to do.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Chris, that's great. When does it ship?
Yeah.
How much is it?
Yeah.
Tell me why an IT manager should care about this.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop the shill, but what it does is it refocuses and repositions it, right? And it forces the person giving the pitch, it gives them the opportunity to actually talk to the end user.
Yeah.
Instead of giving a pre-canned, pre-rehearsed script, it forces them to think. And that is part of my job, right? My job is not to amplify your shill. My job is not to amplify your marketing message. My job is to give the audience the best education, the best information that I can. And so I do that by acting as a surrogate by asking those questions.
And as a journalist for the last 25 years, I'm sure you've gotten much better as time goes on with your questions.
Yeah.
How do you know the right question to ask? Is it what feels right, or do you have a list of some good questions to ask on the tip of your tongue by doing this for such a period of time?
I have a list of questions, right? And we'll stick with the expos for a second. Expo questions are this: is why does it matter?
Yeah.
Right. How much is it, and when is it available? When I started in this, when I started going to InfoComm, which was mid 2000s, there was what I would call an epidemic of vaporware. All right.
What is vaporware?
So vaporware is this: company shows up to a show, right? I don't care what show, XYZ show, and they're going to have this newfangled product, and it does everything under the sun, including bake and slice your bread.
Yeah.
Right. It's fantastic. It's the next best thing. You have to have this.
Yeah.
And it's available next year sometime, right? Or it's available, or we don't know when it's available, right? But it's the best thing you've ever seen, and it's going to change your life. It's going to make your job better, but it's not available yet, and we don't know when it will be, right? And if you follow that product or you follow that company, it will come a point in time where suddenly they'll stop talking about that product because something happened or whatever. And as the years have gone on, and a little bit of personal perspective, I think it is the journalist in the industry that started asking questions. Well, when is this available?
Yeah.
Well, why isn't it available yet? Right. Or this happened to a couple of different companies where year one, they would talk about it. They had the exact same product the very next year, and 12 months later at the next show.
Yeah.
And journalists started asking, well, didn't you have this last year?
Yeah.
And you still weren't sure, and you're still not sure when it's going to ship, right? Yeah. So companies started getting asked hard questions, and they stopped bringing vaporware, right? So the journalists started, holding their feet to the fire a little bit, and helping the consumer start seeing through some of that vaporware, because it did nothing but hurt the end user. It did nothing but damage them and their reputation inside their own companies. Plus, it started delaying a lot of designs and a lot of jobs because, well, I'm waiting for this newfangled thing, right? That's going to change my life. I can't finish this job. We're not going to do this job. We're going to hold off until this newfangled thing is available. Well, on the integration side, on the dealer side, we're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That thing's not available. This is what's available now. Right? And you need to get this job done. So here's what's available now.
Yeah.
But as the end user, I'm like, well, this guy says, this manufacturer says this is going to be the best thing. So as the years have gone on, they have stopped doing that.
Gotcha. In your opinion, is it a journalist's job to ask difficult questions?
Yes.
Where do you draw the line in terms of difficult questions?
Ooh. You can ask difficult questions and still be respectful. Okay. I do not think that asking when something is available is difficult. If you, as the manufacturer, feel that way, then you need to get out of this business.
Great.
If I ask you how much something costs and you think that's a difficult question, you need to get out of this business. During COVID, asking about supply chain was a valid question.
Yes.
If you think it's not, then you need to get out of this business. You do not have to be mean. You do not have to be disrespectful, but you do have to ask hard questions. And disrespectful is subjective. I will be the first to admit that. But you can ask difficult questions and still be respectful.
I agree with that. And I'll keep it to that. And I think you answered that question. Yeah. Excellent. So I want to bring it back to you telling us about the history of AVNation now. So it started in 2011.
Yep.
You told me before we started rolling that the first 5 or so years, part-time. And what did part-time mean? And then how did you evolve into making it a full-time?
Part-time meant we didn't have to make any money.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a labor of love.
Yeah.
Right. It was something that we did for the love of the industry, for the love of the content, for the love of making content. Right. Again, for making a version of radio that I was still in love with.
Yeah.
And at the time, we had done the very first revenue generation. Was we had gotten invited as a media partner to ISE, to Integrated Systems Europe, for the 2015 show. And again, I paid for the hosting. I paid for everything out of my pocket up until that point. So I wasn't kidding about no revenue.
Yeah. And
it was going to cost roughly $10,000 for flights, for hotel, for everything to do. $10,000.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a lot of money.
Sure.
And so we did a crowdfund. I'd never done a GoFundMe.
Yeah. And
so we're like, okay, here's the deal. Right. If you as the audience, if you as our community think that this is valuable and you want to see AVNation's take on ISE, price tag is $10,000, kids. And I was absolutely blown away that we were able to raise $10,000 in 30 days. And so we went, right? My buddy Chris Nutto went with us, George Tucker, Bill O'Donnell went with us. We got an Airbnb, right? And it was a fantastic experience.
Awesome.
I had never been out of the country. I mean, Bahamas really doesn't count, especially for us dumb Americans. But I'd never been to Europe. How about that? And it was just a really, really great experience. And that started us thinking, like, okay, we could possibly make this into an actual business.
Yeah.
And so about a year later, the company I worked for, which was an independent programming house, it got sold. And at the time, I was left with a decision. Now, the company that bought the programming house was very kind. They offered me a position. And in talking with my wife, I'm like, if I don't make this jump, I know I probably never will, right? It seems like a good break. Mm-hmm. It seems like a good spot in life. And so we made the decision to try to make a go at it, basically. And it was a couple really hard years, right? And eventually got to the point where we were profitable enough to where my kids didn't starve, and then we brought on a couple people, and that was really great. And then COVID happened, and COVID was a big hit on everybody, including us. So towards the end of 2020, first of 21, we got approached with a an offer we couldn't refuse type situation.
Yep.
and the board agreed, and so we sold to a company called CTI out of St. Louis, and I joined them as their chief marketing officer, still running AVNation, and after a couple of years of that, we losing focus on AVNation was a bad thing, and so I went back about a year and a half ago, went back to running AVNation full time, and we brought over a fantastic human being by the name of Toby Tungle to take over the CMO spot.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I want to bring it back when it was that pivotal moment of your life.
Yeah.
The name of the show is Elevation with Chris Orm. So it sounds like in that moment you really had a decision to make. Am I going to settle? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but am I going to follow my heart or am I going to settle?
Yep.
And you chose that you were going to follow your heart. Tell me about the emotion behind that, the passion, the going all in, the fear you may have had.
Well, fear is the only emotion.
Fear's the only emotion you had. So did you talk it through with your wife? What was the final decision?
Absolutely.
What was the final decision? When did you push the button and say, I am going to do this?
It came down to her asking, "Are you really passionate about this? And do you think you can really do it?" Right.
And what were the answers to those
Well, the answer
questions?
is yes.
To both.
To both. Right. And in retrospect, and I haven't thought about this in a long time in retrospect, if either one of those answers would have been no, I shouldn't have done it. Right. And I would advise anybody in that position that if either one of those answers is no,
Yeah.
don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're gonna fail one way or the other anyway, right? And I would argue that we did fail for a long time before we started being profitable. But if either one of those answers is no, then you probably shouldn't go with it. Either you're not passionate about it, well, you sure as heck shouldn't do it then.
Yeah.
Right. And if you honestly don't think you can make a go at it, well, then yeah, you shouldn't do it. Right. And at the time, we had our kids were younger. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, was 10 years ago. So my oldest was 9 at the time, right? So yeah, 2 young kids, a mortgage, a wife, all that jazz. Yeah, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And, I'm glad I did.
I'm glad you did too.
It was a good experience.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. And it taught me a lot.
Besides COVID times, in the early part-time career, were there times where you didn't think you were going to make it, that you were on the very verge of quitting?
Not in the part-time, because again, the part-time was just
Fun.
It was fun. And again, the part-time, I say part-time because the part-time is probably the wrong word, because there was no revenue, so there was no part-time. It was just, we did it for the fun of it.
Sure.
Right. And that was, the joy of it was just doing it itself. Right. It was the first couple of years that when the struggles and the bills, added up, that was the hard time.
Great. So we're almost wrapping for time today, Tim. I know it's been a fast hour, but I wanted to ask you why you love AV. You run a brand known as AVNation. What fascinates you about technology, and especially audio-video technology?
Oh, man.
Didn't know you'd get that question.
I did not. So... Two stories, really quickly, and they both involve audio-visual and experiences. But over the course of 12 months, back in my radio days, I went to see U2 and Prince live. Right. You can't go see Prince anymore. It is a shame. It is but seriously, one of the best live experiences of my life. Right. U2, you can still go see, and I would advise anybody to do so. But both of them were deeply personal and touching experiences, and it was a combination of the audio part, right? And it was music that I grew up to, right? I am 50 years old. Prince and U2 are part of my childhood and my adolescence, right? Yeah. It was also the video elements that were incorporated, and U2 has for 40 years pioneered a lot of the visual aspects of live events. But dude, AV is yeah, it's conferencing, and yeah, it's the way we communicate, but it's also at the heart of some of the best experiences you've ever had. And I don't care who you are, it is a part of the best experiences you've ever had, whether that is a football game, whether that is a concert, or whether that is a museum that you've gone to. It is at the heart. And audio and video communication is how we humans communicate emotionally. And that is quite frankly why I love it.
This is a great answer. So, between Prince and U2, which one did
Prince.
When Doves Cry, or what's your go-to song?
Oh, Let's Go Crazy.
Nice.
And there's a reason, because there is a part of Let's Go Crazy that is his guitar solo at the end that that is right there. I mean, that will, yeah, that'll get me going, more than anything.
I know what I'm listening to in the car ride home.
Yeah.
Last question. Favorite smart home product?
Alexa.
You
And
just triggered so many people's
I'm
devices.
sorry. That has fundamentally transformed the smart home industry, and it has done more for bringing technology into the home than any other product.
That was my first smart home product.
Yeah.
Shout out to my Aunt Marianne, who got that for me in the Christmas of 2019. And
Nice.
She really started this whole thing.
Good.
So, Tim,
Yes, sir.
it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
I learned so much from you. It was a great honor to have you here.
Honored to be here.
So we're going to close the show with that. This has been episode 20 of Elevation with Chris Orm, with episode guest Tim Albright of AVNation. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I really hope you enjoyed something and got something out of it, and we'll definitely see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.